Hi, I'm Gavin, and welcome back to the S.O.U.N.D Project. So today we're here with Matt Crowder, and I'm just so thankful that you came and joined our podcast. We've worked on a few projects together, and it's just going to be cool to sit down and chat with you for a little bit.
It's always a pleasure to hang out with you, Gavin.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.
So first off, tell everybody a little bit about your background, and I guess we could start with your business and what you do.
Sure. Started my business back in 2019. My, original plan was to go into commercial photography.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near that now. Mm-hmm. So COVID happened. Mm-hmm. So I started my business September 2019. COVID happened. I had to do a hard pivot. So I started taking what I knew of photography and my network of digital marketing agencies and started doing virtual tours.
Yeah.
I thought that'd be a great way for people to show off their spaces and do things when nobody's allowed to go anywhere.
Right.
One great client in particular were hospitals, because I guess that women who are expecting like to take tours of the maternity ward of the hospital, and hospitals were not allowing guests.
Right.
So I would create a virtual tour of the maternity ward and teach the nurses how to give a virtual tour over a Zoom call or something like that.
Nice.
But I got really curious as to how the software I was using stitched the tours together in real time, and that's where I started to learn about LiDAR. Mm-hmm. And the camera that I had, the virtual tour camera that I had a very basic LiDAR package built into it. But I started to wonder, how else could I use this? How could I repurpose this camera in ways that it isn't currently being used? And I started learning about the emerging market for laser scanning for, like, let's say, architects and engineers, mm-hmm. In order to create drawings and as-built and so on and so forth. Well, the camera that I had at the time would not cut it for accuracy, so I ended up investing in a more expensive laser scanner in January of 2021.
Yeah.
And then just started reaching out to architects, and I built my business from there.
Yeah.
Got really completely self-taught, but I really just poured myself into it and learned everything I could.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a huge market right now because, needing 3D models, speaking just on our behalf, like, it's very crucial for us to have the appropriate dimensions so that we can do our job properly,
Sure.
and there's a lot of times we're working in a space that is sometimes it's older and all they have is like physical blueprints, and they don't have AutoCAD, they don't have SketchUp, they don't have anything like that, or it's just an existing space that does have that, but it wasn't built the way that it was drawn, and sometimes there's discrepancies, and we really need to get it exactly right, because if a extra column was put in place and we don't have that on the plans and we design something, we have to redesign it completely once we figure out that column's there. So it's just a huge help what you offer for us.
Well, thank you very much. I do find myself doing a lot of old buildings, because sometimes the drawings don't even exist at all.
Right.
And like you said, even if they do exist, they've been minor changes here and there, and it's not accurate anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a market that has been, I guess, not really tapped into. I mean, there's still plenty of people out there who could use the service, mm-hmm. who either have never heard of it, believe it or not,
yeah, or
have heard of it, but they're skeptical.
Right.
So I spend a lot of my time in business development, simply educating people mm-hmm. on what it does, how it works, what the deliverables are, what you can expect, and so on.
Now, I know you work with a lot of architects, do you do training for them? Is that something where you go into their offices and talk about the service, or is it more just meetings where you're letting mm-hmm. them be aware of their services?
As an AIA sponsor, I did get an informational educational presentation approved by AIA. That way architects, when they listen to the presentation, could actually get continuing education credits.
Yep.
So it serves two purposes. I'm building my business because I'm educating them on what I offer. And at the same time, they're getting educated on all the ins and outs and all the details that like architects and engineers and whatnot.
We're certified with that too. So we have 5 courses that we go out and talk to architects about. And it's just a huge help for them because they have to have so many credits per year to keep mm-hmm. their license. And then it's also just good awareness of like the type of services we offer, because just like your services, like our services are typically subcontracted through an architect or a client. And it's just good awareness. And I love it doing that as an education piece too, because it's not just sales, it's more, getting them the tools they need to do their job right.
Yeah, I think a lot of times if you can show them the value through education and no actual sales are necessary.
Right.
Just Oh, you can do that? Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I know that. So you reached out to me originally, I believe, because you had an event you wanted me to go to, and it took us a little bit of time it was the Relationships Over Everything event. Tell more about that and how your involvement with that.
Sure. So it's a business network that I'm a part of called Synergize here in Carmel, Indiana. The idea is that while we are there to build our businesses, you don't go there to sell other people, but you're there to build actual genuine relationships. So the idea is not to go and ask everybody what they do and find out, what can I sell you and stuff. It's more just like, who are you as a person?
Yeah.
What drives you? What are your goals in life? So on and so forth. So building those genuine relationships, number one, it's good for the soul.
Yeah.
Number two, it is good for business because as well as I do, this business is very relationship driven.
For sure.
So having those relationships where, even if the person isn't an architect, hey, I know an architect, so let me introduce you, that kind of thing. So that's kind of how that group works. It's a very non-businessy business network.
Yeah. It's like, I typically don't enjoy networking events, but when you invited me to that, I was like, that's something I could get on board with. And it did take us a while because like you invited me to so many in a row, and it seemed like every time that there was one of those events, I was traveling or somewhere else, and then finally got to go with you to one of them, and it was awesome. And I got to know Aaron and Heather from Synergize as well, and just really good people.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's something that when I have the time to be there, I get so much out of it. Not even the business portion of things. It's just like community and being around like-minded people. So.
Yeah, I think where you and I originally met was AIA, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We were at like an AIA event, and then you told me about the Synergize stuff.
Because we met and I liked you, and I'm like, okay, I like him well enough. I'm going to invite him to this group. So
no, it's great. Well, and it's for us. I mean, I've given your business's name out to a lot of our clients, and even people that aren't our clients. They're just like people that need that type of service. Because I think the first project that we worked on together was the Palladium here in town in Carmel, which is quite the first project to do together.
Absolutely.
It is a beautiful space. It's a concert hall here in Carmel, Indiana, where we're based, and man, complicated geometry. Tell me about like the challenges of scanning a space like that compared to a typical office space, maybe.
Sure. Well, the main challenges were to hit. So you wanted all of the rigging on the ceiling, the speakers, the lighting, and all that stuff was 5-6 stories up. So laser scanners have what they call density settings. Most of the time I scan at lower medium density. Now, density is just a matter of how many points of measurement within a given area. So let's say at 10 meters away, medium density would be probably around 8,000 to 10,000 dots per square meter.
Okay.
So that gives you a little bit of detail, but in order to like pick up the fine objects, you need greater density. And the further away it is, the further away the dots are from each other. So I had to do the entire thing in high density, which is very time consuming. A high density scan it takes a long time. It takes like 2, 3, maybe even 4 minutes per scan with the scanner that I was using at the time. My new one's faster. So it took a while to get all those high density scans in order to have enough detail to capture all the small things that you needed included in that model.
Yeah. And it was, you spent a good portion of the day. And I think you came back another day to complete it because, those scans take a long time and we needed all those details. And I'm sure maybe some clients, it depends on how much accuracy they need. And if they need a quick scan, maybe it's something that doesn't take as long. But in that job in particular, we needed to build computer models of the space and predict reverb time and some other things that we look at for these large rooms, and it just had to be right. And for us, a lot of times if we're going into a space on our own and they don't pay for a scan of any type, like we're physically measuring it with a laser distance finder and AutoCAD pulled up and we're drawing it in real time, and it's just so time consuming. Also not as accurate as what you could do. And so I love being able to bring you in because then I know that like the drawings are going to be accurate, they're going to be clean, they're going to be ready for us to use. It's just a huge help, time saver for us. Especially
when you're trying to be thorough to capture every single little item in the room.
Yeah.
Measuring from wall to wall, ceiling to floor, that doesn't take very long. But no, the high density scans we did at the Palladium, I believe at 10 meters is 27,000 dots per square meter.
Oh my.
So that's how much detail. And not to mention the fact that there were multiple scans, so even higher density than that. I don't think there was a single square meter. I don't think there was a single millimeter in that building that didn't get measured.
Yeah, no, it was perfect and made our job a lot easier, like I said. And then, I mean, also there's a ton of benefits for the client just long term because that architecture is not changing. And if they ever wanted to change a lighting grid out and they needed to work with the manufacturer about where they could put a truss, like everything's mapped out in 3D. There's no guesswork. If they did some sort of stage configuration for some event, they'll have it for that as well.
Sure.
So I always tell clients it's not just the scan for our purposes. Like it's something you're going to have long term and be able to use as you go. So.
I appreciate you bringing me in on that project. One of my personal measurements of success or which cool buildings do I get to scan?
Right.
The Palladium's definitely up there.
Yeah. It's an awesome one. And that actually at the time, we're in a new office now, but it was a 5-minute walk from our old office. So it has the record for the most local project ever because we could walk down there and do our work, which was kind of fun. But since then, we've worked on some other projects as well. Like there's one we're doing for Play Audio in Cincinnati, which that was more of a kind of empty office space, a lot of concrete, and but there were columns there that we had to work around and HVAC, yeah. And so sometimes I'm sure that you're not asked to get those details. You're looking at more at geometry of the room, but then it's great to be able to give special requests like that. Like, hey, can you include the HVAC? Can you include the columns and any sort of weird detail around the window frames or things like that? The fact that you can capture all of that is a big help for us.
Well, the nice thing is even if something doesn't get modeled up front, the point cloud still has that information. So you can say, hey, Matt, hey, did you happen to capture this over there? I know I didn't ask for it, but if you have it, can you put it in there?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I still have that information. So it makes it nice and easy.
Yeah. It's like with us, it's, obviously the shape and the geometry of the room, it all impacts sound. And if we have measurements that are off in any way, or if we thought the balcony height was this, but it actually is this, it changes the performance of the room and changes what our models would create. So yeah, I just get, every time that you get involved with the project and I tell a client like, hey, a scan would be the ideal way to handle this. If you don't do that, we can get by with the methods we've had in the past, but I can't recommend it highly enough.
So there's one thing that you asked me for that I'm always curious about. You want a model that's closed so you can take the volume measurement of the room. So explain to me on a high level, very high level, how that helps you.
Yeah, so with the volume, when you sometimes, and that's going to be a difficult part of this process is getting a closed model, is that when we're designing things in SketchUp, a closed model, you can easily just right-click and get a volume of the space. And the volume plays into our reverb time calculations.
Okay.
And so it's just a quick way of us, especially with like complex geometry like the Palladium and others, like to get a volume of that room, it's not as easy as just length time, width time, height. So there's so many like ornate details that if it's a closed model and we can just easily get that, it just saves us a ton of man hours of doing it ourselves. But yeah, that is the main reason that we're looking for that. So we can get the volume to enter into our reverb time calculations. And then we can also get surface area off of that model too. But a closed model is just a huge help because otherwise we're having to redraw it in some way, and then it kind of defeats the purpose. So
very cool. I'm fascinated by what you guys do. So
yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, same with you. Like when you brought the equipment to the Palladium, I was geeking out about all of the stuff that you had, and like that new piece of machinery that you invested in. I mean, it's obviously top of the line, and you can do almost anything with it.
Yeah, the old scanner I used on the Palladium now that I think about it, was a 4-minute scan. No, pardon me. It was a 4 to 6 minute scan for high density. So each individual scan, and I did a couple hundred scans.
Yeah.
The new scanner that I have, it's like 1:30.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, just because of the new technology.
Yeah.
And then I also have, last year I bought a handheld.
Yeah.
So it doesn't do very high density, but it is very fast. So I can just walk around with it. So
yeah,
just walking around with this little scanner and to capture walls, ceiling, doors, windows, all that kind of stuff is really cool.
So
technology's neat.
Yeah, it is really cool. It's and we live in our technology bubble of acoustics and what we do, but to see the other applications and how they can cross, it's really neat. But I was curious, like us, we work on a lot of different types of projects. I'm sure yours is just every day is different, like the type of scans that you're doing. Like, what are some interesting types of spaces that you work in?
So one of the clients of mine that I believe you referred to me, had me go out and scan the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis.
Oh yeah.
So this was a Catholic basilica, Catholic cathedral. Their auditorium, their sanctuary space, very ornate because it's a Catholic building, Catholic cathedral type building. I think it was a 43,000 square foot sanctuary with over 83,000 square feet of mosaic art everywhere.
Oh, wow.
So this place had like lots of ornate columns and the domed ceilings and everything. I don't know how in the world anybody would hand measure that.
Sure.
But I did high density with a colorized point cloud. It can be colorized because it has built-in cameras, so it colorizes the points. So I actually took a screenshot of the point cloud, and it looks almost like a photograph of like that mosaic piece of art up there. That was a really cool job.
That is really fun.
Here locally, I've done Ruoff Music Center, better known as Deer Creek.
I call it Deer Creek.
Better known
I grew
as
up
Deer
in
Creek,
Muncie, Indiana, and it's forever Deer Creek. But
absolutely. So I got the chance to do that. Old Indianapolis City Hall.
Yeah.
I do a lot of old abandoned buildings. So I did an abandoned brewery up in South Bend, Indiana. It was completely massive.
Yeah.
Probably the most creepy job I've ever done. Their basement was absolutely huge. I had a headlamp on, but it was so pitch black.
Yeah.
I could only see 15, 20 feet in front of me the whole that was a fun experience as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. And, I think that for me, I like mixing it up and doing different things. And I'm sure that's a nice thing about what you do. It's
Absolutely.
like, you never know. I mean, you probably get pictures beforehand of what you're going to scan. You've got to quote the project, of course, but, and also just getting to know the history of the things that you're working in. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I've referred to myself as a professional building explorer.
Yeah.
Just going I get to see every square inch of a building you send me to.
Right.
So old churches are really fun. We're talking about 100, 200-year-old churches. Those are always really fun. Old government buildings, just to see the architecture back then, because I like architecture too.
Yeah.
Just to see the architecture back then compared to what we do now is really neat.
Oh yeah, it's. And I actually wanted to be an architect when I was growing up.
Did you?
My grandfather was an architect, and I just thought hey, that's seems like a really cool profession. While I didn't take that path, it's nice that I still get to play in that world,
Oh, absolutely.
And, you learn something every day, like dealing with other professions and what they're looking for. So, how much travel do you have to do for your job? Is it frequent or?
So I would say that I probably went to Chicago more times last year than I've been the rest of my life.
Right.
As an example, I did a one-day trip to St. Louis to do that cathedral.
Yeah.
Cincinnati. So I think last year I think the furthest away I was Miami.
Okay.
To do a mall down there for Simon Property Group.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get to do quite a bit of travel for some of the smaller jobs. As long as the person out there doesn't need too much detail, I have a lot of people I can subcontract to.
Yeah. That makes sense. Keeps the cost down for clients too, for travel and everything else.
But if there's any kind of really special requests, the amount of subcontractors I can trust with that kind of job are much smaller. So I would end up going out instead.
Yeah.
But
I know that you have the ability to not only scan the interior of rooms, but you've done exterior of buildings too, because there's a project in Macon, Georgia we're working on together. And that was one option that you threw out there is do you want the exterior of this building as well? And I don't know, is there any differences when scanning interior versus exterior that's a challenge for the machinery?
Exterior usually takes a little bit longer depending on how tall the building is.
Okay.
So a one-story building is not that big of a deal, but the taller the building, in order to get the more details up top, I need a denser scan. So that's going to be a longer scan time.
Yep.
I think the tallest building I've ever scanned was about 9 stories. And with the scanner that I currently have, even with the high density scans, it was getting a little sparse up there. So
Sure.
I think I've pretty much found my limit for that particular scanner.
Okay.
Roofs are always a challenge. So
Sure.
when I offer the exterior, I often have a conversation where that's the exterior facade. The roof is a different story.
Yeah.
They need to know what kind of access I have. Is it I think the hardest access I ever used was it was a Hindu temple. It was actually the Hindu temple of Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
Really cool building, by the way. Very,
Yeah.
very, very neat inside. But the roof is 3 floors up in a room that's the ceiling's 3 floors up. So they had this ladder that goes 3 floors up into a hatch. So I had no way to connect, because the scans that I do have to overlap in order to connect for accuracy.
Sure.
I had no way to overlap the scan at the top of that ladder to the scan at the bottom of the bottom. It just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So what I ended up having, fortunately, the building itself was only about 2 stories tall. So I did plenty of scans around the perimeter of the roof that I was able to connect to the scans down on the ground from below.
Okay.
So that was a little bit of a challenge for that. I prefer stair roof accesses.
Yeah.
So I can just scan right up the stairs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Roofs are always a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, are most of your projects, are they just like an afternoon that it takes to do, or is it a full day on almost all of them?
Nowadays, I would say most projects, if I do something really small, like a 2,000 square foot office or studio or something like that, I'm in and out in 30, 45 minutes.
Got it.
Some larger jobs, I did a 250,000 square foot space down in Batesville, Indiana. It was actually 2 Batesville city blocks of buildings that were connected via a bridge over a street.
Okay.
And I did both of those, and the bridge and the exterior and the roofs, and it took 2.5 days.
Wow. Okay.
With 2 people.
And when you're doing those scans, like scanning is only part of it, and then it has to kind of get stitched together. I know there's software involved with that, but then you probably have to manually go in and make some changes to it to tweak it for what the customer needs.
Sure.
Is that part of the process too?
Yeah, so we take all the scans from the individual scanners, because a lot of times we use more than one scanner.
Yep.
So we take the data from this scanner, we import it all into the point cloud software. We got to make sure all the connections are accurate, because connections can be off a little bit, so we need to register them properly and connect this scanner's data to this scanner's data, and then we need to clean the point cloud, because point clouds can be somewhat messy.
Sure.
Things like it's a laser, so mirrors, for example, are like, I call them a window into a room that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes that window into the room that doesn't exist overlaps a room that does exist.
Right.
So now I've got to clean all of that out of there. Windows are partially reflective and partially transparent, so I'm seeing all the stuff outside, but I'm also getting a reflection of the wall behind outside, so I need to clean all that off.
Wow, yeah.
If there's any people moving around, they can just leave a squiggly line from where they walked through the laser scan. So it needs to be cleaned to make it look nice, easy to read, and then I ship that off. Once that's completely published, ship that off to an engineer who, my engineer spends, that's what he does full time, is turn point clouds into 3D models.
Nice.
So he brings it into, let's say, Revit, for example.
Yep.
And then he can just he imports the point cloud, and he can just trace over the walls, the ceilings, the objects, and depending on what level of detail you want, because there's different levels of detail, where an object may just be like a basic shape, or he may actually, a higher level detail, he'll actually create the real shape of the object, which is a lot more time consuming.
Sure.
So he creates the model off of the point cloud, and then we also, as one of our deliverables, offer like a 360 virtual walkthrough, so you can see when you're looking at this model, what's that, what's up in this corner, that kind of thing.
That part is super helpful. I know that became kind of popular with real estate agents, doing house tours and being able to jump to points and things like that. But for our jobs, sometimes it's just good to be able to, we try to get as many photos as possible when we're on site or have the client send it to us. But if we have a full 3D model, we can pretty much just walk through and look wherever we need to see, hey, is there a sprinkler head in this room? Let's go check, and you might be able to see it in the point cloud, but then just to really quickly tour the space, it's really helpful.
I kind of brought that from the earlier evolution of my business, the virtual tour part, brought that in as a deliverable too, because I can only imagine on a large project, you guys go in there and you take, a couple hundred, maybe even a few thousand photos, and then you have to organize those, and then you have to use those photos, or organize them by room, or however you guys organize them, and then you have to use those to try to visualize a 3-dimensional space. And I don't see how that's as easy as just like a virtual walkthrough where you can have a 360 panorama and move around and look around. So
it's perfect.
I've been told by multiple clients that they actually appreciate that more than the Revit model.
Sure.
So
well, and two, you're dealing with different types of clients. Like some people are architects that's really what they're in for, but then there's a client involved too, and they're going to think that part is cooler than all the Revit information that they're never going to touch. So I think it's great. Tell us a little bit about how people would get in touch with you, like a company name and just the best way to reach you.
Sure. Currently, my company name is Immersaf Media. That name was created back in 2020 when I was doing a lot of virtual tours. I have found that isn't the best name for people to understand what I do, so we are in the middle of a rebrand that I'm launching later in August of 2024. The new name is MAPP3D Solutions. It's mapped with a 3D. So MAPPedsolutions.com is the website. It's got contact information on there, phone number, contact page.
Perfect.
It's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Nice. Well, yeah, we'll make sure we link everything in the description so people can get a hold of you. Because, I can't recommend you highly enough. I'm always telling people, if you want things to be accurate, not only dimensionally but acoustically, like we need you involved in getting accurate dimensions if it doesn't exist. So, really appreciate you helping us.
I'm glad to be a part of your projects.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, that's been another episode of the Sound Project. Thanks for being a part of it. If there's any live music venue that you'd love to see a 3D walkthrough of, please comment that below, and we'll see you next week.